Welcome back to Creative Excuses and to my second Baldur's Gate 3 video. Normally I make Elder Scrolls Online builds and gameplay videos and a RuneScape 3 Ultimate Iron Man series on the side, but the response to my first Baldur's Gate video was so good that I am back with a second build for your early game. Today we are talking about a really fun early game build for Baldur's Gate 3 with what I find to be a very fun and impactful playstyle as early as levels 4 and 5. This is my Blessed Ranger build, which I am running on Shadowheart as one of my companions for my first tactician run using my Spellblade from the previous video. If you're new around here, the way that I like to make build videos on other games is to talk about problems and solutions. It's a fun way to talk about why a build works and to talk about a game's mechanics. This is my plan here, so let's jump into it. If you just want the build, skip to that chapter in the video. Today's problem is the problem of impactful actions. In Baldur's Gate's turn-based combat, you have 5 resources you can spend, and like we talked about last time, the best way to be effective is to shove as much power into each of those actions as you can to maximize your action economy. Last time, we talked about maximizing our bonus action, and this time I want to talk about maximizing my action. There are a lot of ways to do this, with the most prominent being things like twin casting the haste spell using a sorcerer, or using the extra attack features on most of the martial classes. These are all really efficient and powerful actions to take because they can either dish out loads of damage through multiple attacks, or buffing your party members with the ability to use multiple powerful actions per turn. Other examples could be big crowd control spells that can control the battlefield or sometimes take the most powerful enemy out of the fight for a few seconds. But different classes have different kinds of efficient and powerful actions. Only sorcerers can twin cast anything, let alone the strongest buff spell in the game. Only martial classes, paladins, and Pact of the Blade warlocks get extra attacks. And crowd control comes in different flavors and varieties on every class, with some being more useful than others. Clerics, our topic here, have a few powerful actions they can use throughout the game despite not getting the famous twin casting or extra attacks. Namely, clerics get the level 1 spell right away in the tutorial called Bless, which makes 3 members of your party more accurate and more likely to succeed on saving throws. Later on, they also get the insanely powerful Spirit Guardians spell. These spells cannot be used together because they both require concentration, and you can only concentrate on one spell at a time. You have a one-track mind, it's just how it works. But they are very, very strong in their own ways. However, once these spells are active, you generally want to keep them up for as long as you can, but you still have turns where you've got to do something, or else you're just not doing anything and you're leaving your team out to dry. Clerics can also cast heals with their spell slots, or maybe a Channel Divinity as an action. They can also spend spell slots on the very strong Guiding Bolt spell, which does solid damage and can give an ally advantage on their next attack. But you don't really want to be burning through spell slots, casting Bless your first turn and Guiding Bolt every turn after that in the early game especially. So how can we keep our action impactful after we use Bless or Spirit Guardians? We'll get there. The second problem is a meme, and an accurate one at that. In the early game especially, accuracy is pretty awful for the whole team, but Shadowheart especially feels like she is always missing everything. This is in part because her racial cantrip's attack roll is made with intelligence instead of her main wisdom stat, and because Sacred Flame, her cleric cantrip, doesn't make an attack roll but forces a dexterity saving throw. Sometimes this makes Sacred Flame a decent option, but often it's just not that good in the early game when enemies may have a solid dexterity stat with proficiency in dexterity, but a low armor class. Her dexterity and strength are also middling, so she isn't particularly good with weapons either. Basically, Shadowheart feels like she misses everything. And so her actions after casting Bless or Spirit Guardians oftentimes just don't feel impactful because she just misses. So how do we keep our action on Shadowheart, or your main character, feeling impactful throughout every turn in combat? This is where the Blessed Ranger idea comes in. The Blessed Ranger build solves the impactful action and the accuracy problems in one easy multi-class setup. This setup starts out by respecking Shadowheart into a life domain cleric as soon as possible. I know her lore says she should be a trickster domain cleric, but life domain is just so much stronger for so many reasons. You get heavy armor, you get a channel divinity that is a fantastic area of effect heal, that restores on short rest, and you get bonuses to your healing done. It is so strong. Make sure to have your first 2 levels in cleric to ensure saving throw proficiency in wisdom, which is very nice in the late game. When we respec her though, we want to change her stats around to something like this: 10 strength, 16 dexterity, 14 constitution, 8 intelligence, 16 wisdom, and 10 charisma. The 10s are just to keep us from having too many negatives, while dexterity, wisdom, and constitution are there to beef up our attacking stat, casting stat, health, and saving throws. Why 16 dexterity though? Because as soon as we are level 3, we are going to multiclass Shadowheart into a ranger, which will give us longbow proficiency, which is our new favorite weapon. With this setup, we now have an attack with an attack roll against relatively low armor class enemies in the early game. This should prove to be significantly more accurate against goblins and gnolls than Sacred Flame is. You could use the Produce Flame cantrip instead, but that doesn't get as many bonuses as you can get with a weapon, so we're going to use this instead. At level 4 though, we take a second level in Ranger for the archery fighting style, while still progressing our spell slots. Now, we get a +2 to our accuracy with our bow, making Shadowheart very, very accurate very early. This is likely right before you're going to take on any of the early bosses in Act 1, and so it's a great power spike. What is so critical here, though, is that no other fighting style gets an early +2 to accuracy like the archery style does. The other kicker is that +1 longbows are somewhat easy to get in Act 1. So between proficiency, a +1 bow, your fighting style, and your dexterity, Shadowheart is going to have a whopping +8 bonus to her ranged attack rolls. That is some absurdly good accuracy against low armor class enemies, which are plentiful in the early game. How does this setup help make her actions impactful though? Here's how normal battles play out with this setup at level 4. On the first turn, Shadowheart can cast Bless on herself and 2 allies with a level 1 spell slot. This gives an additional 1 to 4 bonus to accuracy for all the affected characters, which is excellent already, and only contributes further to Shadowheart's newfound accuracy. Now her bonus with a bow is going to be between 9 and 12, which is wild against enemies with only 13 to 15 armor class. On every subsequent turn, Shadowheart can now fire off a very accurate bow attack to get some consistent damage out. She can cast or upcast something like Hail of Thorns, which is a ranger spell for some okay area of effect damage, or she can cast Guiding Bolt for some hopefully big damage on a single target and grant advantage to an ally on a priority enemy. These are all very impactful actions, and they feel good to use. Did I mention that you can also drop a nice AoE heal, like you have Mass Cure Wounds already, at just level 4? Because you can do that too, and with all the easy access to heal buffing items in the early game, that can feel really, really good too. The combination of Bless, consistent damage, and healing utility makes this early game Cleric Ranger combination feel great. At just level 4, we have made Shadowheart into an acceptable damage dealer and a very solid support at the same time. She's accurate, and she can make her entire party more effective at the same time. She is the Blessed Ranger. But I'd be lying if I said the build was already all the way online here. The build really feels good at level 5. At level 5, we take a 3rd level in Ranger to get our subclass, the Hunter. This subclass feels so good because using the Colossus Slayer feature, we just straight up beef our ranged attacks up by another 1d8 with no penalty once per turn as long as the enemy has already taken some damage. If I was a level 5 ranger, I could of course just have an extra attack, which is worth slightly more than a 1d8, but I wouldn't have access to Bless, to big heals, or the bonus action healing or sanctuary spells that a cleric can use to turn the tide of a fight. Essentially, by taking 3 levels of Ranger and 2 levels of Cleric, we have made our party more accurate and more likely to pass saving throws, which is insanely valuable. We have invalidated the Shadowheart Misses meme, and we have made her a decent single target ranged damage dealer. And this is without itemization. With the right itemization, all available in Act 1 and encountered depending on your story and budgeting choices, you can make her exceptionally valuable with very powerful actions on every single turn. In my playthrough right now, Shadowheart is a top damage dealer, putting out some 15 to 25 damage per turn with very high accuracy, and this is without the sharpshooter feat, which is only going to make her an even bigger monster at level 6. I'm enjoying this build so much, and even more so when I get to add in a potion of speed to give her a second action for a few turns. Potions of speed are a huge dopamine rush on this character. I didn't even mention the nice utility spells that rangers get access to, like Long Strider, Enhanced Leap, and Speak with Animals if your party wants or needs any of those. There's just so much that this build can do. So that is the Blessed Ranger. 2 levels of Life Cleric plus 3 levels of Hunter Ranger, and every action on every turn becomes a powerful tool to help out your party. From there, you have a few options for finishing out the level split during the rest of your run that all have their pros and cons. In the description of this video, I've listed my 3 recommended level splits between Cleric and Ranger. Choose the one that you're going to enjoy the most. Even after writing them all out, I don't quite know which one I want to take myself. It's fun having cool options like this, and I hope you all enjoy the build as much as I am. If you enjoyed this video, found it helpful, and want to see more like it, like the video, subscribe, and comment to feed me dopamine and encourage me to make more Baldur's Gate 3 videos. Until then, I'll see you all in the next excuse. Hey, this is an after the video segment where I show something fun. The Titan String Bow, which is my bow of choice for this build, actually applies its damage bonus to both the Colossus Slayer and the initial damage of the hit. That means you get an effective +8 damage from this bow on a Colossus Slayer Ranger if you have 18 strength. Late game with Cloud Giant Elixirs, you can get an effective +16 in damage from the Titan String Bow on a single attack, making it one of the best, if not the absolute best bows in the game on the Colossus Slayer Ranger subclass. That is insane.